Ever get that feeling, when you're kind of turning a page in life, like a big birthday or the kids moving out? Maybe retirement's on the horizon. It's that mix of excitement and what's next. Well, today's deep dive looks at two women, and they both lived through some pretty intense new chapters, but in totally different ways.
Mhm.
One is going to chill you to the bone, and the other? Well, she's proof that we humans can get through almost anything.
It really is fascinating, to see how much our lives are shaped by choices we make, but also by those twists of fate that, well, we just can't control.
Yeah, for sure. So first up, we're going back in time to the 1950s. We're heading to America, into the world of Nanny Doss. Just picture this, a seemingly ordinary granny from Alabama,
Hmm.
but she was obsessed with romance novels. And get this, she became a notorious serial killer. She was targeting the people closest to her.
Yeah, her case really gives you a glimpse into the darker side of human nature. It makes you think about what drives a person to do that and how society back then could let these crimes go on for so long.
Okay, so let's start peeling back the layers of this story. Nanny's early life was, well, it was far from those happy endings she was reading about in those novels.
Right.
Think about rural Alabama, crushing poverty, a domineering father. She even had a really bad head injury when she was a kid.
Yeah, and trauma in childhood, especially at such an important time for development, it can really impact the brain. I mean, we're talking about potential personality changes, problems forming good relationships, and in some cases, it can even make someone more likely to be violent.
It's wild, isn't it? I mean, you've got these dreamy romance novels that she just devoured, and then her real life was so harsh. It's almost like she was looking for any escape she could find.
Yeah, I think that yearning for love and connection, combined with her past experiences, it could have been a factor in the pattern we see in her adult life. I mean, this string of marriages where all the husbands end up dead.
And it wasn't just random bad luck, was it? There's a pattern here.
Yeah.
More than just coincidence.
Absolutely. A lot of her husbands were, well, they fit a type. Alcoholic, often unfaithful, and then they die from what seemed like food poisoning. That's why criminologists call this the Black Widow archetype.
The Black Widow. So she was deliberately picking these kinds of men. It's kind of scary how calculated it all seems.
Right. Black widows tend to use charm and lies to trap their victims, and they usually have a reason, like money or wanting to control and get rid of anyone they see as a problem.
Okay, but hold on a sec. Food poisoning. Didn't anyone back then think it was weird that all these husbands were suddenly dying? Weren't there any warning signs?
Well, you have to remember that forensic science wasn't what it is today, and society back then. While women were mostly seen as caregivers, people didn't really think they were capable of being so cruel and calculated. It's pretty sobering to think how easily cases like this could just slip through the cracks.
Wow. So it's like everything lined up perfectly for her to keep getting away with it. But eventually the truth always comes out, right?
Yeah.
So what was the turning point for Nanny?
Well, her first husband actually ran off with their oldest daughter. It happened after two of their four kids died in suspicious circumstances. But even then, nobody really investigated. Things didn't start unraveling until her last husband, Samuel Doss, came along.
Interesting. So what was different about Samuel? Did he somehow see through her act?
Samuel was very religious, a devout Christian. He had strict rules for Nanny. He even banned her romance novels. And he controlled all the money. Their relationship was pretty tense, more volatile than her other
Or
marriages.
maybe she felt trapped, stuck in a situation she desperately wanted out of.
It's possible, but here's what we know. After Samuel got sick and drank some coffee Nanny made, he died. And this time, the doctor was suspicious. He insisted on an autopsy.
Yeah, I bet that autopsy showed it wasn't food poisoning, right?
Right. They found a huge amount of arsenic in his body, a lethal dose that couldn't be ignored. So finally, they launched a real investigation. And Nanny, when they confronted her with the evidence, she confessed to multiple murders.
Wow. So the mask finally came off. Did she show any remorse? Did she try to explain why she did it?
Not really. People who were there said she was weirdly calm. She was even laughing and making jokes with the police while she was confessing. It was creepy, so they started calling her the Giggling Granny.
It's just so hard to wrap your head around. On the outside, she seemed normal, but inside, there was all this darkness.
Yeah, it shows how complex the human mind is and how someone can seem totally normal while hiding something really dark underneath. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always look evil. Sometimes it's right there in front of us, hidden in plain sight.
It makes you wonder, how many other Nanny Doss stories are out there, hidden in the past, just waiting to be discovered. Man, Nanny's case is it's chilling. Makes you realize that You never really know what's going on with people, beneath the surface. But all right, let's shift gears completely here. We're leaving the darkness of Nanny Doss behind, and we're setting sail on a story of, well, just incredible resilience.
Yeah, if Nanny's story was all about the dark side of humanity, this next one really shines a light on the strength of the human spirit. It's about never giving up hope, even when things are really bad, and facing those fears head on.
We're talking about Tammy Oldham Ashcraft. She's a young sailor who lived through a terrible hurricane and then, get this, 41 days all alone at sea. It's a story that would make anyone nervous, even experienced sailors.
Oh, absolutely. It really pushes the limits of what humans can endure, both physically and mentally. And it makes you think, what would I do in that situation? What would I rely on to survive?
So let's go back to 1983. Tammy and her fiance, Richard, were both experienced sailors. They were delivering a luxury yacht across the Pacific, from Tahiti to San Diego. Imagine, perfect days, sailing the open ocean, falling more and more in love with each other, with the sea.
It was a dream job, a total adventure. They were living the kind of life most people just dream about. Sun, salt water, and the freedom of being out on the ocean.
It sounds amazing,
Mhm.
but I'm guessing things were about to go wrong.
Sadly, yeah. They were crossing the equator when this huge storm formed, Hurricane Raymond. It quickly became a Category 4 monster. We're talking 115-mile-per-hour winds and waves over 50 feet high.
Whoa, 50 feet. That's like a five-story building made of water crashing down on you. I can't even imagine how terrifying that would be.
It was a life-or-death situation, and things weren't looking good. They tried to get away from the storm, but Raymond was relentless.
So how did Tammy end up alone in this nightmare? What happened to Richard?
Well, as the hurricane got worse, Richard, being the experienced sailor that he told Tammy to grab the emergency beacon and get below deck. He stayed up top, strapped to the yacht, fighting the storm. It was a selfless act. He was trying to protect her.
Oh man, that's heartbreaking knowing what was going to happen. So did the yacht just capsize in the storm?
He was worse than that. A giant wave slammed into their yacht, the Hazana, and it pitch-poled. It flipped completely end over end. Can you imagine the force of that?
Yeah.
Tammy was knocked out, thrown around inside the cabin, and when she woke up, everything was just destroyed.
The yacht was wrecked, her fiancé was gone, and she was surrounded by nothing but ocean. Just thinking about it gives me chills. So what does she do? Did she just give up hope?
No, and that's what's so incredible about Tammy. She was in this impossible situation, but she found a way to keep going. She was 1,500 miles from land, she had very little food and water, a head injury, and her yacht was barely afloat. But she decided to fight.
But how do you even start to fight back when you've lost everything?
For Tammy, it started with a voice, this presence, like someone was guiding her. It told her to stay strong and focus on surviving. Sometimes it sounded like Richard, sometimes like her parents, but it was always there, comforting her and giving her direction.
A voice. Was she hallucinating? That sounds almost, I don't know, supernatural or something.
Well, when you're alone for a long time and you've been through something traumatic, it can mess with your mind. But whether the voice was real or not, it played a huge role in Tammy's survival. It was a lifeline. It told her to ration her food and water, and most importantly, it helped her figure out how to get to land.
Wait, navigate. But the yacht was wrecked. She had no GPS, no radio. How in the world did she navigate?
This is where Tammy's experience as a sailor and her resourcefulness really come in. She used some of the wreckage to rig up makeshift sails, and believe it or not, she used a simple sextant and her wristwatch to figure out where she was and chart a course to Hawaii.
Her wristwatch, you're kidding, right? Like a regular watch you'd buy at the store.
Yep. It shows you that sometimes the most basic things, the stuff we take for granted, can be lifesavers in a crisis. The emergency beacon was destroyed, but that little Casio watch became her guide. It kept her connected to time, to the world she was trying so hard to get back to.
That's amazing. But even with a plan, 1,500 miles on the open ocean, all alone. That's a journey that most people couldn't even imagine, let alone survive.
It was brutal, scorching sun, huge waves, always worried about running out of food and water. Tammy was pushed to her absolute limit. There were times, she says, when she felt totally hopeless. She had hallucinations and even thought about giving up.
It makes you think. Where does that kind of inner strength come from? What keeps us going when there's no hope left?
It's the will to live, the instinct to survive. But it's also something deeper than that. Humans are incredibly resilient. We can tap into strength we didn't even know we had. Tammy's story is proof of that.
So after 40 days battling storms both inside and out, she finally saw land. That must have been an incredible moment.
Oh, can you imagine the relief? She saw frigate birds flying above, and that's a sure sign that land is nearby. And then through the rain and fog, she saw it, the big island of Hawaii. It was like a symbol of hope, a reward for her incredible determination.
So how does she get help? I can only imagine how amazing it must have felt to be rescued after everything she went through.
She had a few flares left from the emergency kit, and luckily, a Japanese research vessel spotted them. They were shocked when they saw her, weak, exhausted, injured, but alive. They couldn't believe she had survived for so long.
What an unbelievable story of survival. But I imagine she still had a lot of healing to do, both physically and emotionally. How did she deal with the trauma, the loss of Richard, and everything else she'd endured?
It was a long, difficult journey to get back to a good place. The head injury had lasting effects, memory problems, trouble reading, and the mental and emotional toll was huge. But Tammy's a fighter. She got help, talked to other survivors, and slowly started to rebuild her life.
That's so inspiring. She went through such a dark time and came out the other side, not just unbroken, but even stronger.
Yeah, it's a reminder that we can heal even from the worst wounds, and sometimes the very thing that breaks us can make us stronger than we ever were before.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it. We've gone from this calculated cruelty with Nanny Doss to this incredible story of resilience with Tammy Oldham Ashcraft. It's like looking at both sides of what it means to be human, the good and the bad, the capacity for both love and darkness.
Yeah, and it's interesting too how differently they reacted to hardship. Nanny Doss chose manipulation and violence. She was trying to control things by hurting others. But Tammy, when she lost everything, she found a way to become even stronger. She chose life. She chose to find her way back to the light.
It just goes to show that we all have choices, even when it feels like we don't. And sometimes in those really dark moments that our true character comes out.
I agree, and it also shows how important it is to look beyond what we see on the surface. Everyone has their own story, a bunch of experiences that make them who they are. We can't excuse what Nanny Doss did, but maybe we can try to understand what led her down such a dark path.
It's definitely a warning sign. Reminds us to pay attention, to see those red flags, and to remember that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's hiding right there in plain sight, disguised as something normal.
Right. And then you've got Tammy's story, which is like this beacon of hope. She didn't just survive, she thrived. I mean, she could have given up, but she dug deep and found a strength that many of us probably don't even realize we have.
It's amazing. It shows you the power of the human spirit, that will to live, and how resilient we can be when we're pushed to our absolute limits.
And the fact that she went back to the ocean, faced her fears head on, that's huge. It shows that we can heal even from the most painful experiences. And sometimes the very things that break us can end up making us stronger.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these two very different lives, what can we take away from all this? What do you think, listeners? What stands out to you?
For me, it's a reminder to be empathetic and understanding. Everyone's got challenges, we all make choices, and we all carry our own baggage. It's easy to judge from afar, but when we really listen and try to understand what other people are going through, we get a better picture of what life is really about, with all its imperfections and its beauty.
And it's a call to action too, don't you think? To tap into our own resilience, face our fears, and choose hope, even when things are dark.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in learning more about Tammy's story, I highly recommend her book, Red Sky and Morning, or you can check out the movie Adrift. It's a powerful look at what it takes to survive, both physically and emotionally. And it might just inspire you to find your own inner strength.
That's great advice.
Mhm.
And as always, we want to encourage you to stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring the world with open eyes and an open mind. You never know what incredible stories are out there waiting to be discovered.